Hello and welcome back. My name is Georg and in this video we're gonna build this Pires looking kit. And we're gonna do a copper patina effect finish but on wood without requiring a solid copper top. My plan is to use turquoise acrylic paint as a backdrop, then put copper leaf on top and we corrode the copper leaf with a mix of vinegar and fertilizer. This will create irregular patterns of turquoise and shiny copper. Besides that, we will replace this scratchy looking fretboard, we will shape the back of the neck by hand, and we will electroplate some of the hardware also in copper. Wish me luck, because this is my entry to the great guitar build of 2023.
So the first step was already the biggest problem, because this fretboard just wouldn't come off. So I've tried using heat for 3 hours. Then I thought I could get a clean cut with my scroll saw, but it just couldn't cut it. It wouldn't move at all. So I had to use my jigsaw. Of course, this wouldn't get me a clean cut, but what to do? Then I chiseled away the remains of the fretboard. I also used my spoke shave for the first time. And then I tried to sand it flat. Then I'm test fitting the new fretboard, and I wanted to see if there's enough space to have a 23rd fret. And yes, there was. And I'm marking where to cut with a hobby knife, and I'm sawing it off like so. And the fretboard will basically end with the last fret. There's no need to have this overhang as usually on guitars. Then I taped on the fretboard and I drilled 2 pilot holes through the fretboard and into the neck, and then inserted metal posts. This will prevent the fretboard from shifting when we glue and clamp on the new fretboard. However, it wasn't possible to sand the upside of the neck completely flat, as I already reached the truss rod channel and there were some deeper cuts. So I decided, instead of PVA glue, I will use this product called Liquid Wood, which is basically a 2K epoxy in a beige color, and it's easy to sand. And what this will do, it will fill out all the cracks that I couldn't sand out. And here I'm cutting off the squeeze out with a hobby knife before it gets super hard. And now I'm preparing the body to be painted. First I'm raising the grain with a damp rag. That makes the hair of the wood stand out, and I sand it smooth. And then I apply Solaris UV curing grain filler, and I use my museum card to spread it around evenly. I pre-cure the resin with my cheap fingernail UV lamp, but I will let it fully cure in the sunlight later on. Then I sand it smooth, and I repeat the grain fitting process at least a second time. Then we move on to the front of the body. I sand the insides of the F-holes. Then same story, I raise the grain on the top, I sand it smooth, and then I apply the grain sealer. Yeah, maple is a closed grain wood, so it doesn't really need grain filling. So in this case the Solaris will be a sealer. Then I brushed on a white base coat. After it was dry, I sanded out some uneven spots. And now I started applying aquamarine and turquoise acrylic paints with a sponge. This is to create a backdrop for the corroded copper top that we're going for. And I felt like adding in those 2 darker streaks. It might look interesting. Then I'm masking off and I'm doing small touch-ups where the white was showing through. I guess I could have completely skipped the white base coat, but it wasn't really necessary for this. And while the body was drying, I started shaping the neck. First with a spoke shave. I never tried this before, but I soon got the hang of it. The trick was simply to move fast with the spoke shave so it wouldn't get stuck. And once the rough shape was complete, I moved on using the Shinto rasp for the finer details. I want to create an asymmetrical neck, kind of like on a Strandberg, except not exactly, because they have a patent for their neck shape. So my neck will be slightly different. So I would check the thickness from time to time, and I would mark where I need to shave off more. To sand the sides of the fretboard, I did the masking tape trick and glued on some sanding paper to my carpenter's beam. And here's the final neck. And in case you're thinking this neck looks gigantic, that's on purpose. I'm a big fan of a neck being huge. And now I'm drilling some holes, which will be our side dots and fretboard markers. And I fill the holes with the acrylic paint. And then I put some clear coat on top. Then I painted the headstock in the same way as the body. And I apply the UV grain sealer on the back of the neck. To make the fretboard feel nice, I have to sand the fretboard markers flush with the fretboard. I accidentally made some scratches on the fretboard, but those will be sanded out with the radius block. I've added another layer of sealer to the back of the neck. And as a protective layer for the next step, I'm wiping on polyurethane to the top of the body and to the fretboard. And now it's one day later, I'm applying the gilding glue and then I apply the copper leaf. And I brush off the excess. And I repeat the same thing on the headstock. And now, to create the corroded copper effect, I'm pouring on some salt and then I spray on a mix of vinegar and fertilizer. This will dissolve the copper and I leave it in a closed box to see what happens. And I do the same thing on the headstock. Alright, so this was a fail. I left the body in there too long and the salt crystals created some ugly holes. The headstock looks good though, but for the body I want to try again. So I'm sanding it off and I repeat the whole process like before. This time I spray on some clear coat as a protective layer. And here's how I applied the masking tape around those sharp corners of the F-holes. And I use a hobby knife to cut the masking tape into the correct shape. I put on copper leaf again. But this time I will not use any salt, I will only use the vinegar and fertilizer mix. Initially I wanted to make the back of the guitar white, but since the wood looked rather nice I decided to leave it natural, and therefore I'm also covering the white paint in the pickup cavity with some copper looking paint and I seal it with some clear coat. Alright, time to install the frets. This is actually the first time I'm doing this. I'm using PVA glue. Some people like super glue, but the cleanup is easier with PVA. And I have a radius fret press that I use with my drill press. Then the problem was the pliers that I have couldn't cut the frets. The frets are not stainless steel, but still it wouldn't cut it. I need to get some better pliers for the next guitar. So what I had to do is use the pliers and then wiggle it around until the metal would break off, but carefully not to ruin the fret slot. And with each fret I would check with the fret rocker if it would slide over the new fret. This is to avoid having any high frets, and if a fret was too high I would press it in some more with the fret press. To later on only need minimal fret leveling and crowning. And then I would sand on the sides of the fretboard, and then I used a 45-degree file to create some nice fret ends. I would file the sides until it slightly touches the edge of the wood to create a nice round over of the fretboard. And then there's the usual treatment of the fret ends. And I'm checking with the fret rocker if there's any high frets anywhere, and I mark them with a Sharpie. But before leveling and crowning, I wanted to add some extra layers of copper leaf to create a nice design of copper leaf around the pickups. As a nice touch, I'm adding these open covers for the pickups. Then I test fit the pickups. Initially I wanted to use cream pickup rings, but I thought it looks better without. Then I corrode the extra layer of copper. The old copper layer is protected by clear coat, and then I would add a third layer of copper right around the pickup cavities. And this I will not corrode. And then I put on some Solaris. I can't believe it's not lacquer, which is basically a UV curing resin. I don't even know what the difference is to the grain sealer. It kind of seems all the same. Then I started to level sand the headstock and the body. Then it was time to glue on the neck, but I realized that there's no channel for the wires of the neck pickup, or almost no channel. So I need to create an access to the channel, and it's time to glue on the neck. I put glue inside the neck pocket and on the neck, and I clamp it on. I leave this on for 24 hours. Then I proceeded with some thread leveling and crowning, but only the high spots that I found earlier. Now I put on another layer of I can't believe it's not lacquer, and I cure it in the sunlight, and I level sand again. So I need to make sure to have enough of a layer of the clear coat to not sand through, but also to sand out all the shiny spots, the low spots, to create a smooth surface to get a glossy finish later on. Then I sprayed a polyurethane filler in my spray booth. However, with my cheap spray gun, I got some waviness in the clear, which I need to sand out again. I'm not sanding off the whole clear coat, I'm just sanding out the low spots. And then I spray on polyurethane top coat. The top coat is thinner and harder compared to the filler coat we sprayed earlier. And here's the result. It's very glossy, but there's some small waviness, which we will need to sand out again. The back of the board is flat, so I can use the machine to sand it, and I use the finest grit paper that I have, up to 3000 or something, and then I continued with a car polishing, eccentric polishing machine. So here's some of the waviness on the top of the body, and it's a carved top, so I need to sand it by hand. And then I move on to my buffing wheels. I have two buffing wheels, first with a coarse compound, and then I move on with my softer wheel and the polishing compound. And now to add some special details to the guitar, I want to copper plate some of the hardware. I have a separate video on my channel going into more details. There's several baths, one is for electro cleaning, then there's an activator which removes an oxide layer, and here I'm using a chrome stripper to remove the chrome from the bridge posts. Now all the hardware is nickel, then I repeat the cleaning and activating with all the hardware, and then I put everything into the copper bath, and now it's copper plated. However, the copper plating is fragile and it could oxidize over time, so I'm spraying some WD-40 on it to keep the moisture away. Now I'm spraying some car wax over the whole body and over the hardware to make the copper stay nice for a bit longer. And now what's left to do is install the hardware, the bridge posts, don't forget the grounding wire, and installing the direct-to-wood pickups. For the bridge pickup, the wooden floor was a bit too low for the screws to reach, so I'm adding some of the epoxy to make it a bit higher, and under the pickups I put some foam. And I'm installing the machine heads, and I'm soldering the electronics. It will be standard wiring except for a push-pull for coil splitting. As a final detail, I'm adding some copper leaf on top of the potentiometers, which will look nice with the clear knobs. Alright, so thank you so much for joining me on this journey. So I'm happy to say this is probably the coolest guitar I've ever made, and I'm glad I didn't ruin it, because this was the first time for me to shape a neck, to replace a fretboard, to install frets. So all of these things could have gone wrong. Also, this is the glossiest finish I've managed to do so far, which means the Great Guitar Build-Off competition made me go above and beyond. Well, I don't know how well it will do in the voting, but I'm happy to say that I'm not embarrassed by my entry, at least. Okay, time to see what it sounds like.